Hey everyone, Henry Kaminsky here from the Passionpreneur Inner Circle, and we are on episode number 15. And we have an amazing guest today, one of my dear friends and colleagues, Terrell Washington, who is a super savvy entrepreneur. And before I embarrass him, I'm going to let him introduce himself. And he's one of the modest guys and one of the most behind the radar guys you're ever going to meet. So I'm going to let him introduce himself to you. And after he does his introduction, you'll know exactly why he is on this show today. So Terrell, good to see you, my man. Let the audience know who exactly you are.
Good to see you as well. And hello to the group. My name is Terrell Washington, based out of Youngstown, Ohio. I serve as, head of operations for HLW Fast Track, which is a Black enterprise top 100 company for the past 10 years. We have over 1,000 employees. It's one of the 20 largest McDonald's franchises in the U.S. From a traditional sense, I would be a COO, but I don't really believe in business titles because people don't work for you based upon your title. They base how they work for you based upon what you can do for them and what you have displayed in the workplace. In addition, I own stores for myself and do a little consulting when my schedule permits. So I guess that's about it.
Like super modest guy. Yeah, we just own and operate 23 McDonald's franchise restaurants, have 1,000 employees, and do some consulting on the side too. So I'm just busting chops. So Terrell, funny story with Terrell, right? So I'm not going to take it way back, but the funny story with Terrell is my wife and I actually bumped into him and his family on our honeymoon out in Spain and Italy. And it wasn't until I saw my wife saw Terrell's ring on his finger, and we were like, what exactly does that ring mean? Because it was the McDonald's arches, and it was a very prominent ring, a beautiful ring, and it had some diamonds on it. I'm not gonna lie. And so my wife, so his sister was like, oh, Terrell didn't tell you, and we were like, no. She was like, oh yeah, I work at McDonald's, and we were like, okay. So then his sister Ari was like, would you tell, like, seriously? So he was like, well, yeah, we actually own and operate, 23 stores. And I was like, holy crap. I was like, that's insane. So him and I have connected at the hip ever since, really. And I've been married now, it's going to be 6 years. So that's how long I've known you. And he is the element of surprise. Let me tell you. 2 birthday parties, a birthday party, a quick trip to Florida. This guy just shows up unannounced. And just the element of surprise is this guy's MO, I swear. But the reason why I have Terrell on the show is because Terrell is a wealth of knowledge. He's a wealth of experience. And his mindset is so on point. And he met me down in Florida a couple of weeks ago when me and my wife just got out of here due to the weather. And we had some really deep conversations while my wife was upstairs resting. And we were talking about the concept of how relationships determine the level of service either you get or you provide. And so I want to kind of hand it back over to Terrell, because Terrell has 1,000 employees. So my biggest question to Terrell was like, how do you get 1,000 employees to work with you and to work for you at the same time? And so I'm going to hand it over to T Wash and let him kind of expand on that.
Well, I mean, relationships are important, and my approach to business is really looking at the personal parallels that you have and how things would work if we took the same situation and just took it over to your personal life, because it's a whole lot easier to get around people's barriers and the walls they have up in the workplace if you just keep it purely work wise. But the thing with relationships is that we're all getting something out of each and every relationship that we have, something different out of each and every relationship. And it may be harsh for some people to hear, but people aren't working for you because they like you. That's not the case. And people aren't in your life and you don't have a relationship with them purely because they like you on a surface level. They like you based upon what you do for them. And they work for you based upon what you can do for them. And in return, they are giving something to you for that. Um, and that's what you have to realize. And once you feel out what it is they're looking for and are able to communicate, here's how I'm making your life easier, and you are able to highlight what you're contributing to the relationship and why you are beneficial, it makes it very easy to get results out of them.
That's awesome. So I love this one example that you gave to me in Florida. And so you have this checklist, right? That you said, like, McDonald's is known in the world as like processes and systems, right? You guys got it down to the pickle, to the, how much ketchup, mustard, whatever, right? And then you guys also have this Bible or checklist to make sure that each staff member is doing exactly what you need them to do on each shift, right? So, for example, what happens when you get that staff member who's not completing their tasks? And I want you to share with the audience how you get these folks to understand why it's so important, whether you're the janitor or you're the one of the managers, supervisors. So go ahead.
So in all the stores, and you can see it at a lot of other quick service restaurants. If you go to a BK, if you go to wherever, they have a book very similar. So we have a pre-shift checklist, and we have a list of like 7 absolutes that all shift managers have to do. I'm very operations driven. I feel that if you take care of the operations, the money will be there at the end of the day. So the pre-shift checklist is said to solve 80% of the problems on every shift. So there's no reason why you wouldn't do it. Now you only got to manage 20% of the shift. The other 80% is taken care of. And so it's the very first thing I pick up in the stores. Every single store I visit, I pick up the pre-shift checklist. They call it my Bible because it's what's gone to every single day, and it's a non-negotiable. If that's not done, we don't have anything to talk about until that's taken care of. That's the grounds fee for me to take care of any problems you have, is for you to do that. So a lot of times we'll see that managers would maybe do 4 out of 5, and I just so happen to come in on the one that's not done. So I ask them, all right, so why isn't this done? It's an absolute. I'm like, oh, well, I was working on it. I was trying to get it done, but what was done? And I was like, no, it's pre. Hooked on phonics, we know pre is before, so your shift started at 5. Nothing to do with it being busy. It should have been done at 4:59. But we know it's an absolute. So let's look at it this way. You're getting it done 80% of the time. 4 out of your 5 shifts, you're getting it done. Could you imagine if your significant other was faithful 80% of the time?
I love it. I love that. I love that.
Can you imagine if they're responsible for cooking dinner and 80% of the time they cooked it, the other 20 they didn't? You'd have an issue with them. And when you present it that way, it's a whole lot easier for them to see, oh, it's not him being a hard ass. It's just the straightforward of, no, this is what the expectation is, and I'm not meeting it. If I did this in any other relationship in my life, it wouldn't be out of the norm for them to walk away. And that's when relationships end, is when someone stops contributing what they did at the beginning that got you into the relationship.
That's powerful stuff. And I think, and I'm no savvy salesman by any means. If there's one thing that I would love to focus on and work on is, my salesmanship. I don't think I do too bad, but one of the biggest things that I taught myself and studied a lot was relatability. And when I talk to people that are pretty savvy in sales, they all tell me the same thing, which exactly you just said was when you can relate it back to them somehow, some way to get them to understand that it's not you, it's them, but in a positive way. Um, that's what shifts the needle. That's what moves people into actually taking action and either, uh, you know, doing what they're supposed to do, buying from you, and so on and so forth. So, I would love to get your take on this concept. So, I'm a huge Gary Vaynerchuk fan. Like, really study him, and I don't only listen to him, but I watch how he does things and why he does things. And he had mentioned this concept of 51-49 in all your relationships. And basically what he says is no matter what relationship you're in, you should always contribute 51% to that relationship because it gives you the positioning at all times. And I would love to hear your take on that because I found that to be that he said that once or twice in his videos. And man, I can't tell you when I'm working for my clients how that pops into my head. Like when I get distracted or I get a project that needs attention and there's other things going on, outside of work, right? That aren't that important, but it's like kind of like entrepreneurial ADD. Before I go and ignore that issue, that now pops into my head, 51-49. Like I must do this. Like my clients are counting on me. And so the concept of 51-49, what do you think?
I like it. I mean, and it's very similar to my approach in terms of talking about what you're doing for them. Because if it's very clear that you're contributing more than they are, they have a reason to stay with you. I'm not a sales guy. I understand who I am. I'm not a rah-rah. I'm not a networker. I build people around me who do those things because that's not me. But I understand the importance of being able to go back and say, hey, this is how I'm making your life easier. Yeah, there's some trade-offs of it. This is what you're giving in exchange for me making your life easier. Yes, you can go here, you can go there, but here are the benefits. And that's with that 51%. It's just being a matter of being able to describe what that 51% is to them. Because if it's not clear, a lot of times, and I've found this just because I don't see stores on a regular basis the way I used to because a lot of employees have been with us for a while. And some of them may have been underneath me when I was a store manager or a supervisor. So now they don't see me every single day. They don't know what I'm doing. And so a lot of times they think, oh, just because you're not there, you're not working.
Right?
I mean, your clients aren't in your house right now, but you're working.
Right.
So being able to describe what that 51% is to them and making it very clear at the onset of the relationship, what you're doing is what's going to attract them. It's like dating. When you go and try and approach somebody and you're convincing them to become exclusive, you describe what you're going to do to make their life better. Oh,
It's the truth.
You're eating at McDonald's every Friday night. I'll take you to Red Lobster. Like you explain to them what you can do to make their life better, what that 51% is. And I think that you could contribute 60%, but if they don't know, it's going to create an issue.
Yeah. And it all comes back to, again, the topic of this discussion is, it all comes back down to the relationship and how well you've constructed it, built it, managed it. What else? Nurtured it. Yeah. And those are all things that we need to pay attention to on both sides, both sides of the scale. And so let me ask you another question. So from an entrepreneurial standpoint, because this audience they're all business owners. They're all looking for guidance and leadership and, from those that are successful. I mean, and a lot of the folks that are watching this are very successful and they're trying to take themselves to the next level. And so what types of, I got to be just conscious of time, but what are some of the entrepreneurial relational, I guess, mishaps or where people get tripped up on that hold them back from really getting to where they want to be or need to be?
I think the biggest thing for me is knowing yourself. Be honest about who you are and then authentic in your presentation. Because for one, if you don't know who you are and aren't honest about what your strengths and weaknesses are, you can't build a successful team around you. Like I said, I'm not a big networker. I'm very humble, low key, don't need to talk to a whole bunch of people. But I understand that employees need the cheerleading, the rah-rah, the reinforcement. So as a result, both of my directors are big rah-rah blowing whistles, doing cheers in meetings, just pumped up all the time. Southern hospitality type people, want to go out and join every group in the community and talk to them. So I understand that. So I know I need that on my team because you need to lift people up at times. And so we balance each other out. I know when I was in a store manager, I'm not a morning person. I typically go to bed 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. My best work is done between 11 and 1. You'll get emails from me. So the very first thing I trained was my opening manager. So this way I didn't have to get up and take care of stuff at 5, 6, 7 in the morning. I knew that. Hey, I don't want to talk to anybody at that time. That's not me. I can take it a rest, but let me build this and make this a strength so I can do what I do. In addition, if you don't know yourself, you're not going to be able to attract the people you want because your reputation is based on what you put out there and what you do. And for example, when was the last time you seen your employee at Abercrombie and Fitch go apply for a job at Hot Topic on his break? It's not gonna happen.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
you have put out the image of this is what I want around me. And
Yep.
so as a result, you're not going to get that. So you have to be mindful of who you are and who the public thinks that you are.
That's powerful. Yeah, it's knowing self and being self-aware and knowing where your weaknesses are. And I said this in one of my emails this week, and I said, let me just remind you. I said I don't want to spend too much time on it because you don't want to spend your head. You don't want to spend head time in weaknesses. You don't want to be swimming around in those thought processes. So I said I'm going to make this real quick. Make sure that you understand what those weaknesses are, just like you said, and delegate that out. Like, make sure that that is taken care of by somebody else because that is what holds you back. Like, squandering and floundering in all of this nonsense. Like, for example, me, like Facebook advertising, that's not something that I want to do. It's extremely time consuming. You got to have patience of a saint. And so we have somebody on staff that handles not only my Facebook advertising for unique designs, but for our clients. And that's all he does. 20 hours, 40 hours a week is Facebook ads. And now this frees me up to do, interviews like this and really get out in front of the people that I need to be out in front of and network. But so leveraging your time is a huge thing in entrepreneurship. And it's funny, when I flew out, I want to share this with the audience. When I flew out to your surprise 30th party, we were all upstairs and your dad was sitting a couple people away from me, and we got into that deep conversation and we were chatting it up. And I asked your dad, I was like, how do you get to the level of where you and your son are? Like, how do you get there? Like, you got to start somewhere, right? And he said this to me, which I'll never forget in a million years. He said, Henry, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do. Your reaction to what happens to you is what determines where you go next. And I thought that that was so powerful. So, can you share, like, and we'll wrap it up. Can you share an example of that in relation to the topic of discussion today?
Yeah. So when I became a supervisor a couple of years ago, I moved up from being a GM to being a supervisor, and it's very different because you're no longer managing one store, so you don't have your hands around everything on a daily basis, and now you have to lead 100% on influence, which is very different and difficult for folks. So January, February had absolutely worst P&Ls I've ever had in my life. Was completely embarrassed. So bad that I didn't give them to the GMs because I didn't want them to be afraid and walking on eggshells based upon the numbers. And I had to take a step back and realize that it wasn't on them. It was my fault.
Hmm.
I had to take accountability for it and see, before I could talk to them about changing their routines or anything, I had to look at what I had control of, because in every single situation in your life, you have some level of influence on it. You may not have influence on the full spectrum of 10 out of 10, but you can take that 10 down to an 8.
Mhm.
Now, if you only take it down to a 9, that's on you. You shouldn't say anything to anybody else until you've taken it down to an 8 and then handed it off. Because if you aren't executing at 100%, it is hypocritical of you and compromising your leadership ability, to ask somebody else to do more than what you're doing. Then they should be leading if they committing 100%. So once I did that, and then realizing that a lot of the supervisors um, had seen me grow up because we had been in Ohio since 98, 99. And it was very clear that in order for people to follow me, it had to be crisp, clear that I was the best person to lead. So I told them flat out in meeting, my goal is that I'm going to run better P&Ls and better food costs and service times than anybody in this room, so far ahead that you look crazy and look like you have a personal vendetta to question my leadership, because it's not even close.
Hmm.
And so, um, and as a result, we built that up, and then it was no question. Once we turned over VP of operations, who would step up, because it was here now, it's heads and tails away. You're sending your people to my GMs to train. I'm not going to see them. Just send them to the store. Go ahead. So it was making the case for why you should lead. It makes it a whole lot easier. But it was because I had to look at what I was doing to influence my credibility as a leader
Hmm.
and get to the position that I wanted to. But that's just it. I mean, you have to understand your influence in every single situation, and that's it. I mean, you can get knocked down, but how are you going to react? And that's taking the accountability for whatever that incident is.
That's awesome, dude. And there's so many powerful moments in what you just described. And if I could paraphrase a couple, one was, you saw an issue, you took you took ownership of it.
Mhm.
You didn't brush it under the rug. You didn't cross your fingers and hope it went away. And
Mm-mm.
then you looked at yourself and you said, "What? How did this happen?" And you realized that it was me. And okay, so now how do we fix this? And then you got super focused, and you
Yeah.
said, "Here's my goal. I'm going to make it so ridiculous that they're going to question my, they're like, in a good way, they're going to
Hmm.
question my leader." And I thought, like, that is, if we can rinse and repeat what you just did, what you just modeled for us, when we
Hmm.
are hit with with struggle, right? Or if we get hit with something like that, it's a home run. I mean, you just have to take we just have to take our time and go through those exact motions. And I think you're 100% on point with that. When something comes up and you can't, and you try to run from it or hide it, you're
Yeah,
finished.
it blows up. I mean, I have my meetings are a little bit scary to some folks because I tell them the ground rules are that when we sit down for a meeting every single week, nothing is off the table. I want you to be able to openly disagree, say however you feel, as long as we do it in a respectful manner. That's part of the accountability is you put it on the table and saying, this is where I'm at on it. We don't have to agree. And at the end of the day, we still got to follow what I say goes, but you have to be able to speak up and say it because otherwise, if we hide that stuff, it's going to blow up 6 months down the road. And that's when you get those vent sessions where it's too hard to recover the employee because now instead of solving for one problem, you're solving for 3, 4, 5 different things that happen that week or that day that they can't overcome. So I always say that we got to try and solve for one variable at a time. We can't solve for multiple things. Solve for one variable. One
Wow.
variable. Most people don't make it past like algebra 1, and in algebra that's one variable. If you're like me, it took me 3 tries, so I don't want to go past that. So put it all on the table so we can solve it now, and then move on to next week's set of problems the next time we sit down. But it's being honest and forthright in our communication so that we can solve it. Because at the end of the day, it's about a team, and nobody is bigger than the team. I tell people all the time, nobody is bigger than a team. I've fired my own cousin. I fired my uncle. Tell people doesn't matter who comes in. If it's my father and he wasn't good for the team, I would walk away and separate my company. It'd be my mother come in. She's not right for the team. She got to go, and everybody understands that.
Yeah. That's all. Listen, I'm going to leave at that. I mean, that is a powerful close. And it makes so much sense. No, it makes so much sense. And so I just want to thank you tremendously for taking time out of the day. I know you're traveling. You're in San Diego right now at a
Yep.
convention, and you literally stepped away to do this. So I thank you for your time, and thank you for your knowledge and wisdom and experience and sharing it with my audience.
Oh, no problem. It was a pleasure. Respect you great deal. Respect the community and the great things that are happening in it. So any way that I can help, I'm more than willing to chime in. Not usually on the post, but if someone wants to shoot me a message, got an issue, I'm more than willing to help. So I appreciate the invite, and it was fun as always.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks a lot, brother.